My Aunt Ellen is stuck in the past. She still uses a flip phone. Seriously, Grandma Tech over here probably doesn't even know what the cloud is. The room erupted in laughter. 14 people around my sister's mahogany dining table, and every single one of them thought that was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate. Tyler wasn't finished. He never was. I'm just saying, Aunt Ellen, it's embarrassing. You spent your whole career playing with radios, and now you can't even figure out how to FaceTime. My company just closed a Series B. We're building the future, and you're over there with your little flip phone like it's 2004. More laughter. My sister Patricia, Tyler's mother, raised her wine glass in mock salute. She's always been that way, Patricia said. Even when we were kids, Ellen and her gadgets, her little hobby. Hobby? 26 years in the United States Army Signal Corps, 3 combat deployments, a Bronze Star I've never shown anyone in this room. And to my own family, it was a hobby. I took a sip of water and said nothing. If you've ever been satisfying to watch satisfying stories about quiet people proving themselves, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is just getting started. My name is Ellen Vance. I'm 61 years old. And for the past 8 years, I've been retired, if you can call it that. I consult occasionally, technical work, communications infrastructure, nothing I can discuss in detail. That's what I tell people when they ask. Most don't. Growing up, I was the odd one in the Vance household. Patricia was the social butterfly, cheerleader, homecoming queen, married a real estate developer, raised 3 children in a 6-bedroom colonial with a pool. She learned early that charm was currency, and she spent it liberally. I learned something different. I learned that when you're the quiet one, people fill your silence with their own assumptions. They assume you're simple, slow, unambitious. They assume your life is small. Because you don't announce its dimensions, I enlisted at 18, 2 weeks after graduation. My father called it a phase. My mother cried. Patricia told her friends, I couldn't get into a real college. The Army saw something else. They saw a girl who could listen to static and find patterns, who could distinguish a signal from noise when everyone else heard chaos, who could sit in a room for 18 hours calibrating equipment while others went stir crazy after 2. Signal Corps became my family. The hum of radio waves became my language. But there are things I cannot say at Thanksgiving dinner. Things I've never told my sister or her children or her husband, Richard, who sells luxury condos and thinks that makes him important. I cannot tell them about the embassy in 1998, the one that doesn't appear in news archives, the one where 17 American souls huddled in a basement for 9 days while the city burned above us, and the only thread connecting us to extraction was a 40-year-old radio frequency I'd memorized from a manual that had been decommissioned a decade earlier. The digital systems failed first, then the satellites, then the backup satellites. But radio waves don't care about satellites. Radio waves don't care about the cloud. Radio waves travel, whether or not some 22-year-old in a tech startup believes in them. I cannot tell them about the voice on the other end, calm, patient, guiding us through coordinates while mortar fire shook dust from the ceiling. I cannot tell them that 3 of those 17 people are alive today because I knew which frequency to try when everything else went dark. That's classified. It always will be. So when Tyler calls me Grandma Tech and the table laughs, I smile. Because silence has become the safest armor I own. This Thanksgiving was Patricia's production. As always, she'd outdone herself. The turkey was brined in something French-sounding. The table settings matched the autumn centerpiece. The wine cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And the seating arrangement made her priorities clear. Tyler sat at the head of the table, opposite Richard, the golden grandson. 22 years old, already a co founder of something involving cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence, and a lot of words I suspect he doesn't fully understand. I sat at the far end near the kitchen door, the seat closest to the exit, the seat you give to someone you're not quite sure you had to invite. I'd driven 4 hours for this. 4 hours from my apartment in Virginia, where I live alone with my equipment and my books and a cat named Morse who doesn't judge me for preferring quiet. Patricia had called 3 weeks ago. "You should come, Ellen. Tyler's doing so well. He'd love to see you." What she meant was, Tyler's doing so well, and you should witness it. What Tyler meant, apparently, was, you should provide contrast. Seriously, though, Tyler continued, gesturing with his fork, I don't understand how someone can work in technology their whole life and end up so disconnected. It's like being a pilot who's afraid of flying. Communications technology, I said quietly. Not consumer technology. There's a difference. Is there? Tyler grinned. The grin of a young man who has never been told he's wrong. Because from where I'm sitting, a phone is a phone, and yours belongs in a museum. I didn't answer. I watched the candle flame flicker in the draft from the kitchen. Tyler's company is valued at $12 million, Patricia announced to the table, as if anyone hadn't heard this already. Twice, during appetizers. His investors flew in from San Francisco last month. They took him to dinner at that restaurant. What was it called, honey? 11 Madison Park, Tyler said. 3 Michelin stars. The tasting menu was $400 a person. $400, Richard repeated admiringly. That's real success. I thought about the MREs I'd eaten in bunkers, the canteen water that tasted like rust and chlorine, the meals I'd missed entirely because the equipment couldn't be left unattended. Ellen never did understand business, Patricia said, not unkindly, the way you might speak about a child who struggled in school. She was always tinkering, always in her own little world. Some worlds are smaller than others, Tyler said. And that's when the doorbell rang. Patricia frowned. We're not expecting anyone else. Richard stood, dabbing his mouth with his napkin. Probably carolers or that HOA woman again. He walked to the front door. The rest of the table continued eating, murmuring about the quality of the stuffing, the wine, Tyler's latest acquisition. I heard the door open. I heard Richard's voice shift from casual to confused to something approaching alarm. Can I help you? A voice I hadn't heard in 6 years answered, Good evening. I'm looking for First Sergeant Ellen Vance. I was told she'd be here. The room went quiet, not the polite quiet of a paused conversation, the rigid quiet of people who don't understand what they're hearing. Patricia set down her fork. First Sergeant? Footsteps crossed the foyer. Heavy, measured, the cadence of military boots on hardwood. And then he appeared in the doorway, Brigadier General Marcus Cole, 64 years old, silver hair cropped close, jaw like granite, wearing his dress uniform, all of it. The ribbons, the stars, the weight of 38 years of service pressed into every crease. Behind him stood 2 younger officers in service dress. They didn't enter. They waited. General Cole's eyes swept the room. 14 civilians in expensive casual wear, frozen mid-bite around a turkey carcass. His gaze moved past all of them. It stopped on me. First Sergeant Vance. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. I apologize for the interruption. Patricia's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Ellen, do you know this man? I stood slowly. My napkin fell to the floor. General Cole? Ma'am? He nodded once. Crisp, respectful. We have a situation. Tyler laughed. It was a nervous sound, brittle at the edges. Wait, hold on. First Sergeant? My aunt was a secretary. She answered phones. She wasn't. Tyler. Patricia's voice was sharp, uncertain. Be quiet. General Cole didn't look at Tyler. He hadn't looked at anyone except me since he walked in. The SATCOM protocols are being upgraded, he said. Globally, new encryption standards. The old frequencies are being decommissioned. He paused. But we've hit a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that requires your ear, First Sergeant. You're the only one left who knows the old frequency architecture, the original signal patterns. His jaw tightened. When the digital systems fail, and they will fail eventually, we need someone who remembers how to listen. The silence in that dining room was absolute. Tyler's face had gone pale. General Cole reached into his coat and withdrew a slim folder. He held it toward me. Ma'am, we need you back. I didn't reach for the folder. Not yet. 26 years of service teaches you that documents presented in front of civilians require careful handling. Whatever was in that folder wasn't meant for the 14 sets of eyes currently boring into my back. General, I said quietly, perhaps we should step outside. Of course. He lowered the folder. But first, I need to confirm something. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a small object. Metal, rectangular, about the size of a postage stamp, a frequency identification tag, brushed steel with a serial number etched into the surface. I hadn't seen one in 8 years. Do you recognize this? I did. It was mine. Or rather, it was the tag assigned to my station during Operation Nightfall, the embassy evacuation that officially never happened. Where did you get that? It was recovered during a recent audit of decommissioned equipment. The tag itself is meaningless. But the frequency it represents? He turned it over in his fingers. That frequency saved 17 lives. And right now, it's the only backup protocol we have that doesn't rely on satellite infrastructure. Tyler leaned forward, squinting at the small metal tag. What is that? Some kind of old dog tag? General Cole didn't answer him. His attention remained fixed on me. The new encryption standards go live in 72 hours, he continued. Once they do, every legacy frequency will be purged from the system permanently. We need someone to archive the old patterns before they're lost, someone who doesn't just read the manuals, someone who wrote them. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. I'm sorry, but can someone please explain what's happening? Ellen was in communications. She fixed radios. She wasn't. She gestured vaguely at General Cole's ribbons. She wasn't involved in anything like this. Ma'am, General Cole's voice was patient but firm. Your sister holds a security clearance that I'm not authorized to discuss in this setting. What I can tell you is that her expertise is irreplaceable. Security clearance. Richard laughed weakly. Ellen? She drives a 12-year-old Honda. The vehicle someone drives has no bearing on their value to national security. Tyler stood now, too, his face flushed. Okay, this is ridiculous. My aunt is a retired secretary who plays with ham radios in her spare time. She doesn't have security clearance. She doesn't know anything about encryption. This is obviously some kind of... Tyler. My voice was quiet, steady. Sit down. He stared at me. I don't think I'd ever spoken to him that directly in his entire life. You spent the last 2 hours explaining how I'm stuck in the past, I said. How I don't understand technology. How my career was a hobby. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, set it back down. You're right about one thing. I am stuck in the past because the past is where the backup systems live. The ones that work when everything your generation builds stops working. The table had gone completely still. Even Patricia had stopped trying to speak. Do you know what happens when a satellite fails, Tyler? When the servers go down? When the cloud disappears? He didn't answer. Silence. Complete silence. No data, No communication, nothing. I folded my hands on the table. Except radio waves. Radio waves don't need infrastructure. They don't need the cloud. They travel through the air the same way they did 100 years ago. And when everything else fails, when your $12 million company can't send a single email, that's when people like me become valuable. General Cole watched this exchange without interrupting. When I finished, he gave a slight nod. First Sergeant, if you're ready. I pushed back my chair and stood. Patricia stepped forward, her hand reaching toward my arm. Ellen, wait. You can't just. We're in the middle of Thanksgiving. You can't just leave with. She looked at General Cole as if seeing him for the first time. Who are you exactly? Brigadier General Marcus Cole, United States Army, Commanding Officer, Strategic Communications Division. He paused. Your sister served under my command for 11 years. 11 years? Ma'am. General Cole's patience was beginning to thin. I don't have time to provide your family with a detailed service history. What I can tell you is this. In 1998, your sister maintained the only functioning communications link during a level 5 embassy evacuation. She kept that link active for 9 days under conditions that would have broken most operators in the first 12 hours. 3 ambassadors, 4 intelligence officers, and 10 support staff made it to extraction because of her. He turned back to me. The frequency she used that day was supposed to be decommissioned. It wasn't in any manual. It wasn't in any database. It existed only in her memory and in one physical document that was destroyed during the evacuation itself. He held up the small metal tag again. This is the only proof that frequency ever existed. And right now, with global communications infrastructure more vulnerable than it's ever been, we need to rebuild what we lost. The silence stretched. Tyler sank slowly back into his chair. His face had gone from pale to something approaching gray. I don't understand, Patricia said weakly. You said she was a secretary. You told us she answered phones. I never said that. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. You assumed it. There's a difference. But you never corrected us. You never asked. I walked toward the door where General Cole stood waiting. The 2 officers behind him snapped to attention as I approached. First Sergeant Vance. One of them, a captain by his insignia, saluted crisply. I returned the salute automatically. Muscle memory from 26 years of service. Behind me, I heard Richard's voice, strangled and confused. Did they just salute her? General Cole turned to address the room one final time. I understand this is unexpected, and I apologize for disrupting your holiday. His voice carried the authority of decades of command. But I want to be clear about something. The woman you've been dismissing all evening, she's not obsolete. She's essential. When the satellites fail, and they will fail, the only thing standing between communication and chaos will be people who remember how to do things the old way. He looked at Tyler. Your aunt doesn't need the cloud, son. The cloud needs her. Tyler didn't respond. He sat frozen, his fork still suspended over his plate, his mouth slightly open. Patricia stepped forward. Ellen, wait! I paused at the threshold. Can we talk about this? Can you at least explain? I can't. I met her eyes. I never could. You just never noticed. I walked through the foyer, past the tasteful autumn wreath, past the family photos that lined the hallway, Tyler's graduation, Tyler's company launch, Tyler's investor dinner. Not a single picture of me in uniform. Not a single acknowledgement that my life had contained anything worth commemorating. The November air was cold and sharp as I stepped onto the porch. General Cole fell into step beside me. Your family seems surprised, he observed. They usually are. At the end of the driveway, a black government SUV idled with its lights off. One of the officers moved ahead to open the rear door. Ma'am, General Cole stopped and turned to face me directly. I want you to know, what you did in 98 is still classified. It will probably stay classified for another 30 years. But the people who matter, we know, we remember. That's enough. Is it? I looked back at the house. Through the window, I could see the dining room. 14 people sitting in stunned silence around a cold turkey. Tyler was staring at his hands. Patricia was saying something to Richard, her gestures sharp and agitated. They've spent 26 years not understanding what I did, I said. Another 30 won't make a difference. General Cole studied my face for a long moment. You know what the real difference is between their technology and ours, First Sergeant? What's that? Theirs is designed to be replaced. Ours is designed to survive. He gestured toward the SUV. Shall we? I started down the driveway. First Sergeant. I stopped. General Cole's voice softened just slightly. When the embassy fell, you kept broadcasting for 9 days straight. No sleep, no backup, no guarantee anyone was listening. Do you remember what you said when we finally reached you? I remembered. I'd been running on adrenaline and desperation for so long that when the extraction team's voice came through the static, I hadn't been able to speak for a full 30 seconds. I said, "Signal received, standing by for instructions." You said it like it was routine, like you hadn't just performed a miracle. General Cole shook his head slowly. That's the difference between people who talk about technology and people who understand it. When everything falls apart, the talkers panic. The operators keep transmitting. He opened the SUV door. UV. The digital world is fragile, First Sergeant. It always has been. And right now, the only thing standing between stability and silence is a handful of people who remember what your nephew's generation never learned. What's that? General Cole smiled, a rare expression that transformed his granite features. That the old ways aren't obsolete, they're insurance. I climbed into the vehicle. The leather seats were warm. The interior smelled like coffee and government paperwork. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, I caught one final glimpse through the dining room window. Tyler had stood up. He was holding something. My napkin, I realized, the one I'd folded beside my untouched plate. He was staring at it like it contained answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. Maybe it did. General Cole settled into the seat beside me and opened the folder he'd been carrying. 72 hours, First Sergeant, that's our window. He spread several documents across his lap. The legacy frequency architecture exists in 3 places: your memory, a partial recording from the 98 evacuation, and approximately 6 pages of handwritten notes recovered from a field manual you annotated in 1996. I remember those notes. Good, because we need to reconstruct the entire backup protocol before the new encryption goes live. If we lose the old frequencies, we lose our failsafe. I scanned the documents, technical specifications, frequency charts, satellite positioning data that had been obsolete for 2 decades. General, these frequencies were decommissioned for a reason. The equipment to broadcast on them barely exists anymore. It exists. We've located 3 functional units in storage facilities across the country, 2 more in allied nations. He closed the folder. The equipment is old. The knowledge is older, but when the digital infrastructure fails, and it will fail, First Sergeant, probably sooner than anyone wants to admit, that old knowledge will be the only thing keeping critical communications alive. The SUV turned onto the highway, leaving the subdivision behind. Your nephew was right about one thing, General Cole said quietly. What's that? You are stuck in the past. He settled back against the seat. Thank God for that. I watched the suburban lights fade into the darkness behind us. Somewhere in that darkness, 14 people were still sitting around a Thanksgiving table, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Let them process. I had work to do. The drive to Fort Meade took 2 hours and 43 minutes. I spent most of it reviewing documents I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. General Cole didn't interrupt. He understood that the work had already begun, that somewhere between Patricia's dining room and the Maryland border, I had stopped being a retired aunt with a flip phone and started being First Sergeant Ellen Vance again. The facility hadn't changed much. Same concrete corridors, same fluorescent lighting that hummed at a frequency most people couldn't hear. Same security checkpoints manned by young soldiers who looked at my civilian clothes with barely concealed confusion until they scanned my credentials. Then they snapped to attention. Ma'am, at ease. The communication center was 3 levels underground. When we reached it, I stopped in the doorway and let myself feel it. The familiar hum of equipment, the soft glow of monitors, the particular quality of air that comes from climate-controlled rooms housing sensitive electronics. Home. A young specialist, couldn't have been more than 24, approached with a tablet clutched to his chest. First Sergeant Vance? I'm Specialist Torres. I've been assigned to assist you during the protocol reconstruction. Torres. I nodded. What's your background? Digital communications, ma'am. Satellite uplink systems, network architecture. He hesitated. I have to be honest. I don't know much about legacy radio frequencies. My training didn't cover anything pre-2010. That's why I'm here. I walked past him toward the main console. The equipment spread before me was a strange hybrid. Modern screens displaying digital readouts alongside analog dials and switches that looked like they belonged in a museum. General Cole said you kept a link active for 9 days, Torres said, following me, during an embassy evacuation using equipment that had been officially decommissioned. That's correct. How? He seemed genuinely bewildered. The manuals from that era, we've looked at them. Half the frequency specifications are missing. The calibration procedures, reference equipment we don't even have anymore. I sat down at the primary station and let my fingers rest on the console. The manuals were incomplete because they were written by people who had never operated under field conditions. I began adjusting the frequency dials, slowly, carefully from memory. The real specifications existed in 2 places: classified documentation that was destroyed during the evacuation, and the heads of the operators who used them. But if the documentation was destroyed, then the operators become the documentation. Torres fell silent. I continued calibrating. The first frequency came to life with a soft hiss of static. Torres leaned forward, staring at the waveform display. That's not in any of our databases. No, it wouldn't be. I made another adjustment. The static resolved into a cleaner signal. This frequency was designated Epsilon 7. It was created during the Cold War as an emergency backup for diplomatic communications. Officially, it was decommissioned in 1987. Unofficially, a handful of us kept it memorized, just in case. Just in case of what? Just in case everything else failed. I turned to face him. In 1998, everything else failed. Satellite systems went down. Digital networks were compromised. The embassy's primary communications were destroyed in the initial attack. We had 17 people in a basement with no way to contact extraction teams. And you used this frequency. I used this frequency. I turned back to the console. For 9 days, I broadcast our position, our status, and our extraction requirements on a signal that technically didn't exist. The only people who could hear it were operators old enough to remember the Cold War protocols. And someone answered. I thought about the voice that had finally broken through the static on day 9. Calm, professional, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Someone answered. We worked through the night. Torres proved to be a quick study. Once he understood that legacy systems weren't inferior, just different, he began to see the patterns I was showing him. By morning, we had reconstructed 3 of the 7 emergency frequencies. General Cole appeared at 600 with coffee and a status update. "The Secretary of Defense has been briefed," he said, setting a cup beside my station. "He's authorized full support for the protocol reconstruction, whatever resources you need." "I need time." I took the coffee gratefully. These frequencies aren't just numbers. They're relationships between signal strength, atmospheric conditions, and equipment calibration. It takes time to rebuild that knowledge. "How much time?" "More than 72 hours. General Cole's jaw tightened. "The new encryption goes live in 58 hours now." "Then you'll have to delay it." He stared at me. In 38 years of military service, people didn't often tell Marcus Cole to delay anything. "First Sergeant General." I met his gaze steadily. "You brought me here because I'm the only one who knows these frequencies. If you want them reconstructed correctly, I need time. If you want them reconstructed quickly, find someone else." He held my stare for a long moment, then he nodded. "I'll make some calls." He walked away, already reaching for his phone. Torres watched him go with something like awe. "Did you just tell a general to change his timeline?" I told him the truth. I turned back to the console. There's a difference. The next 48 hours blurred together. I worked. I slept in 2-hour increments on a cot in the corner of the communications center. I ate whatever Torres brought me and didn't taste any of it. And slowly, frequency by frequency, the old protocols came back to life. It wasn't just technical work, it was archaeology. Each frequency carried memories, the circumstances under which I'd learned it, the operations where I'd used it, the voices that had traveled across it in moments of crisis. Epsilon 7, the embassy evacuation. Delta 3, a covert extraction in Southeast Asia, 1994. Sigma 9, a hostage negotiation that lasted 11 days. Each one a thread in a web of communication that had existed before satellites, before the internet, before the digital infrastructure that my nephew's generation took for granted. Torres worked beside me, taking notes, asking questions, gradually understanding that what we were building wasn't obsolete technology. It was insurance against a future where all the shiny new systems failed simultaneously. "First Sergeant?" His voice broke through my concentration on our 44. "You have a visitor." I looked up from the console. Patricia stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 confused-looking security officers. "Ma'am, she doesn't have clearance for this area. It's fine." I stood slowly, my joints protesting after too many hours in the same position. "Give us the room, please." Torres hesitated, then gathered his tablet and left. The security officers followed. Patricia and I stared at each other across the humming equipment. She looked terrible. Rumpled clothes, smeared makeup, eyes red from what might have been crying or might have been a sleepless night. Probably both. "How did you find me?" "I called every military base in a 300-mile radius until someone would tell me something." Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how many people hung up on me?" "I imagine quite a few." She took a step into the room, then stopped. Her eyes moved across the equipment, the monitors, the controlled chaos of a working communication center. "I don't understand any of this." "I know. I don't understand any of you." Her voice rose. 26 years, Ellen. 26 years, and I thought you were just a secretary who played with radios." I kept my voice level. "I know what you thought. Why didn't you tell us?" The question hung in the air between us. I thought about all the moments I could have corrected her assumptions. All the family dinners where I'd sat silently while she and Tyler and Richard discussed their accomplishments as if mine didn't exist. All the years I'd let them believe what they wanted to believe. "You didn't ask." "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than I intended. You want to talk about fair? Patricia flinched. For 26 years, I served this country in ways I can never fully explain. I missed holidays. I missed funerals. I missed our mother's last birthday because I was in a bunker on the other side of the world, keeping 17 people alive through sheer stubbornness and a radio frequency that technically didn't exist. I stepped closer to her. And every time I came home, every single time, you treated me like the family disappointment, the odd one, the one who never quite figured out how to be successful. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd kept locked for decades. Every time I tried to tell you something, you changed the subject. Every time I mentioned my work, you talked about Tyler's company or Richard's sales numbers or your latest renovation project. You weren't asking questions, Patricia. You were filling silence with noise because my silence made you uncomfortable. Patricia's face crumpled. Ellen, you don't get to weaponize curiosity now and demand honesty. You had 26 years to be curious. You chose not to be. Silence fell. The equipment hummed around us. Somewhere above, the world continued turning, digital systems processing billions of transactions per second, satellites beaming data across continents, young tech entrepreneurs building the future on foundations they didn't understand. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted between us. I'm sorry. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry I didn't respond. Not because I was angry anymore, but because some things can't be fixed with apologies. Tyler's been a wreck since you left, she continued. He keeps looking at that napkin, the one you folded beside your plate. He said, she swallowed. He said he never noticed before how precise it was, how you fold everything precisely, like it matters. It does matter. Precision matters. Details matter. I returned to my console. When you're the only link between 17 people in rescue, the difference between a correct frequency and an incorrect one is the difference between life and death. I learned that lesson a long time ago. Your son never had to. He wants to apologize. He asked me to tell you that. He can tell me himself someday when he's ready to actually listen instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. Patricia wiped her eyes. Will you come back when this, whatever this is, when it's finished? I considered the question. I don't know. It was the most honest answer I could give. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. General Cole appeared, his expression carefully neutral. First Sergeant, the secretary has agreed to delay implementation by 96 hours, but he's asking for a progress briefing. I'll have 3 more frequencies reconstructed within the hour. And the remaining protocols will be complete before the new deadline. He nodded once. Ma'am, he turned to Patricia. Your sister is needed. I'll have someone escort you out. Patricia looked at me one last time. Ellen. Go home, Patricia. Take care of your family. I turned back to the console. I'll call you when I can. She left without another word. The door closed behind her. General Cole remained. Personal matter resolved. Managed. Not resolved. I began the next frequency calibration. Some things take longer than 72 hours to fix. Don't I know it? He watched me work for a moment. First Sergeant, for what it's worth, the people in this building understand what you've given, even if your family doesn't. I didn't look up from the console. That's enough, General. Is it? I thought about the question. Really thought about it. It has to be. The protocol reconstruction was completed with 6 hours to spare. 7 emergency frequencies, 3 backup communication channels, 1 comprehensive manual that Torres typed up while I dictated, capturing 30 years of institutional knowledge that had previously existed only in my memory. When it was done, I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for decades. General Cole appeared with a formal commendation letter and an offer. The Strategic Communications Division could use a permanent consultant, he said. Someone to train the next generation of operators. Someone to make sure this knowledge doesn't disappear again. I'm 61 years old, General, and you just spent 48 hours outworking people half your age. He set the letter on my console. Think about it. I thought about it. I thought about my apartment in Virginia, with its quiet rooms and its equipment, and Morse the cat waiting by the window. I thought about Patricia's dining room, where 14 people had watched me walk away without understanding anything about where I was going or why. I thought about Tyler's face when the soldiers saluted me, and I thought about the voice on the radio in 1998, the voice that had broken through 9 days of static to say, "We hear you, Epsilon 7. Extraction team is en route. Hold your position." "I'll do it." General Cole smiled. "Welcome back, First Sergeant." 6 months later, I stood in front of a classroom filled with young communication specialists. 23 faces staring at me with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Torres sat in the front row. He'd been promoted to sergeant and assigned to my training program. "Today," I said, "we're going to talk about what happens when everything fails." A hand went up in the back. "Ma'am, everything like what?" "Everything like satellites, everything like internet infrastructure, everything like the digital systems you've been trained to depend on." I walked to the front of the room. "What happens when all of that goes dark?" Silence. "Anyone?" More silence. I picked up a small device from my desk. Old. Battered. A handheld radio that had been manufactured before most of these specialists were born. "This happens." I turned it on. Static filled the room. Radio waves, analog signals, technology that doesn't care whether the satellites are working because it doesn't need satellites to work. I adjusted the frequency dial. The static resolved into a clear tone. "This is Epsilon 7, an emergency backup frequency created during the Cold War. Until 6 months ago, it existed in 3 places: my memory, a partial recording from a classified operation, and a handful of annotated notes in a field manual that was supposed to be destroyed." Torres leaned forward, watching the waveform display on the training console. "Now it exists in your training materials. It exists in the new emergency protocol documentation. And by the end of this course, it will exist in your memories, too." I set the radio down. Because someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe 20 years from now, the digital world will fail. And when it does, someone in this room is going to be the only link between critical personnel and rescue. The only voice in the static. The only hope. I looked at each of them in turn. That person needs to be ready. That's why we're here. After class, Torres lingered. "First Sergeant, I have to ask." "Go ahead." "Your nephew, the one who said you were stuck in the past." He hesitated. "Has he come around?" I thought about the phone call I'd received 2 weeks ago. Tyler's voice. Uncertain and halting, nothing like the confident tech entrepreneur who had mocked me at Thanksgiving. He'd asked questions, real questions, about what I did, how I did it, why it mattered. I'd answered some of them, answered some. "He's learning." Torres nodded. "And your sister?" "Also learning." I gathered my materials. "Some lessons take time." "Ma'am?" He stopped me at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you were stuck in the past. The new protocols you helped build, they're going to save lives someday." "Because of you?" I looked at him. "That's enough, Sergeant." "Is it?" The question echoed through me. The same question General Cole had asked, the same question I'd been asking myself for months. Was it enough? I thought about silence, about all the years I'd spent not explaining, not defending, not proving anything to anyone. I thought about how that silence had been misread as weakness, as simplicity, as failure. And I thought about what that silence had actually been: discipline, focus, dedication to work that couldn't be discussed at dinner parties or measured in stock valuations or photographed for social media. The quiet kind of service that doesn't announce itself, the kind that waits in the static until it's needed. Yes, I said finally, it's enough. I walked out of the training center into the afternoon sun. My flip phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Patricia. Dinner next month? Tyler wants to learn about radios? I smiled. Some things don't change. I still prefer quiet. I still drive a 12-year-old Honda. I still carry a flip phone that Tyler once called Grandma Tech. But now, when I fold my napkin precisely beside my plate, my family notices. Now, when I say I work in communications, they ask what that means. And now, when the room goes silent, they've learned to wonder what I'm listening for. The old ways aren't obsolete, they're insurance. And